Thank you so much, Cecilia. All right, and now, Rosa Alcalá. She is the author of Undocumentaries and The Lust of Unsentimental Waters, and now My Other Tongue. The recipient of an NEA Translation Fellowship, she's translated the work of Cecilia Vicuña and among other poets. Spit Temple, the selected performances of Cecilia Vicuña, edited and translated by Alcalá, was runner-up for a PEN Award for Poetry and Translation. Born and raised in Paterson, New Jersey, she now lives in El Paso, Texas, where she teaches in the Department of Creative Writing and Bilingual MFA program at the University of Texas, El Paso. Here she is.
My wife is Carmen and Cecilia. I've known Carmen for 11 years and Cecilia for more than 20 at this point. I'm having my feelings right now. I'm having the feels. And also, I don't always read with family in the audience, so my brother Carlos is here somewhere back there, and my extended family, and Mia, who I told someone I was my former roommate who I found in the Village Voice more than 20 years ago when people found roommates in the Village Voice. So it's really special to have all of you here and to have so many people who make what I do possible by believing in me. Carly, who's there. Really the book when it was chosen, the manuscript when it was chosen by Meme Bersenberger and Roberto Tejada, it was in somewhat of a final form, but the amount of time that Futurepoem allowed me to sort of look at it and edit it and go through it really changed it and made it better, and I was really happy to have that time. And there was no moment where Carly made me feel like you need to wrap this up, like this is the last edit, and I feel like that time was really important to me to understand what this book meant. And Dan Macklin, who I've just admired for the work that you do, and selflessly, I know, because people who run presses do it selflessly. And so there just seems to be so many wonderful people. And I want to remember something that Cecilia told me many years ago when I was sending my first manuscript over and over and over to the National Poetry Series. This manuscript from MFA. And she said, form relationships with people, become part of the community. You don't need to sort of just bang your head up against the same wall, right? Find a place for your work, find a place where you're understood. And I feel like I've found that after all this time, and that's really special to me. So I feel like I'm in a good place. So a little bit about this book. Get it together, Rosa. A little bit about this book. So My Other Tongue, the idea and what I was saying to Carly as we were thinking about the design is I really wanted to emphasize, I really saw this as sort of using typography to get the many levels of meaning of the book. So it's mother tongue and my other tongue, and then her tongue, mother tongue, my tongue, other tongue, etc. And I love that the pink looks like a tongue that it's kind of lapping you up, because it's very corporeal in a way. I mean, it starts with the birth of my daughter. I mean, it's not chronological, but sort of, I started writing these poems when my daughter was born, my daughter Rebecca, who puts up with me traveling a lot. And it sort of ends before my mother dies, even though the book, as I wrote it, felt like an elegy, because I knew that was going to happen at some point. I anticipated that the book would probably, that she would die before the book was out, and that's exactly what happened. And so there's a lot here about nursing and being a mother, and also grappling with this thing that many of us grapple with as children of immigrants, is feeling like you don't belong anywhere. You don't belong in English, you don't belong in Spanish, you're not really American enough, you're not, wherever your parents are from. And so it grapples with that. It grapples with the sense of finding a place of belonging through language. And so I guess I'll read some poems from here. So I'm going to begin with the last poem in the book called Ghost Song. and this was a moment before my mother died where I was thinking about her and I was thinking of her as dead already, even, and then I was surprised to remember that she wasn't. Ghost song. 3 times on Saturday I remember you as dead, Mama. I reach under my shirt, surprised to find the nipple dry, surprised there's something left of you, an orange I section in the sun and hand to my daughter. The fight this morning to part evenly her hair. Ghost milk again on the nipple as I make the bed. Bitters drained from eggplant, black liquid through a colander. Bedtime is classic, matricide. She touches my nipple through pajama shirt and sings as Sappho to her beloved. I like your beauty, beauty. This is called Voice, an essay. There's a lot of questioning of voice in the various ways, like, actual voices that come from people, but also the ways in which voice is this sort of contested thing in poetry. And I wanted to think about voice as being maybe all we have in poetry. Voice, an essay. I believe in voice as I do in ghosts. Even Freud saw the ghost of a dead patient in his office. There is a grain of truth concealed in every delusion. When my friend died, his parents detected in the sudden clinking of the chandelier his presence, as if unexpectedly he had returned from college to ask, "What's for dinner?" And they laughed for the first time in days. A voice is all that can cut through it. Soon after, his bereaved girlfriend slept with his brother, easily mistaken as his twin. Did they make love as a way to speak to him through each other? They were right who inveighed against the voice too sexual an organ. Sometimes at night, a voice rises from a set of actions deep inside, this wooing of another voice, a voice we cannot help listening to. And in Spanish pleads with someone who can't hear me. It is as if I have multiple mouths and ears inside and outside of the dream. I have also many lovers in attics crowded with costumes, and my father is alive walking backwards over a railing. Jeff breaks the spell, calling me back into the present in English. He shakes my arm and the voice retreats. A phantom can thus be sensitive to idiom. I try to run toward my father or close the hatch behind a lover or simply fall back asleep. I do not sublimate in the same way in Chinese or in French. Freud relates the story of the apparition in third person, revealing only later that he himself had witnessed the ghost. Then, that the figure was not a ghost, but a dead patient's sister also afflicted with Graves' disease. The voice in the dream visits again and again and is mistaken as the same. Why does it appear? To understand a shared affliction? To take the place of the dead or air its concerns? I bet the sister came to settle the doctor's bill. My grandmother slept with the lights on, her long gray locks tightly wound, worried her dead husband would return to fulfill his final threat. If you're not good to me, I'll come in the night and drag you out of bed by your hair. The ghost of my grandfather, night after night, not as diaphanous figure, aerial and bellowing, but as a voice that could conduct in his wife's mind a terrifying rehearsal. Fareed and I talk not of ghosts, but of family stories that possess us and traffic bodies through our poems. Mientras más violenta es la historia, menos hablan los personajes de sí, consigo, con otros. Es un ritmo irrespirable. I believe in poems as I do haunted houses. We say someone must have died here. There is a patched wall where the bullet exited the head. We make sense of noises, this one being a noisy ghost, by some fuzzy tale the neighbors tell in pieces, a tiny bit of absent narrative. We ask questions into abandoned rooms, the answers not apparent until we play back what we've taped on our sensitive recorders and listen agape to voices rising in waves and peaks. Or we try to conjure them by moving our fingers back and forth over letters that spell out exactly what we didn't expect but take as true, or they keep telling us no, no, no in jerky movements of our wrists. Voices, like ghosts, always win. They can walk through walls or move furniture. And if you were wondering why I was doing air quotes throughout this poem, I just wanted to tell you it's a poem that's in dialogue with several other voices. So Voice and Essay contains quotes from Derrida's Archive Fever, from an essay by Alice Notley called Voice, David Shapiro's poem Voiceless, Nathaniel Mackey's Cante Moro, Barbara Guest's The Voice of the Poem, Kristeva, who else? Valerie Maher, the poet, the Mexican poet, and Michel de Sarteau. So there are a lot of people I'm in conversation with there. So this is a poem called Voice Activation, and I'll read the epigraph. So one of the reasons, there are a lot of reasons why I wrote this poem, and one of them is thinking about this fantasy that, if when you turn to poetry at a very young age, poetry becomes a way to sort of create a world or control the world or make sense of the world, right? This is, probably a groundbreaking idea. But it becomes the way also that you prove that you belong to a language, right? So in this poem, so that's one of the reasons I wrote Voice Activation, is how could my voice in a poem actually make something happen, right? How can it control something? And the second thing, so this, I was telling this story to someone, is often I'd be with Cecilia or with, other people who are trying to get through some voice activation software, right? You call like the phone company or whatever, and they don't understand the voice on the other end, right? They have to keep repeating over and over again, and Cecilia would get very frustrated that she couldn't be heard, right? That this machine wouldn't respond, and she would repeat herself over. And this has happened to all of us, but after some research I realized that the software is really designed to only recognize some voices and not others, a standard kind of voice, a standard English. And it more often recognizes male voices than female voices. So this is called Voice Activation. So it starts with an epigraph from Wittgenstein that I think is very familiar probably to many of you, from Zettel. Do not forget that a poem, although it is composed in the language of information, is not used in the language game of giving information. So this is the text of the poem entered into a... Oh, hold on. This is the text of the poem fed into a text-to-voice software. So I'll read the epigraph again. Do not forget that a poem, although it is composed in the language of information, is not used in the language game of giving information. This is voice activation.
This poem, on the other hand, is activated by the sound of my voice, and, luckily, I am a native speaker. Luckily, I have no accent and you can understand perfectly what I am saying to you via this poem. I have been working on this limpid voice, from which you can read each word as if rounded in my mouth, as if my tongue were pushing into my teeth, my lips meeting and jaws flexing, so that even if from birth you've been taught to read faces before words and words as faces, you'll feel not at all confused with what I say on the page. But maybe you'll see my name and feel a twinge of confusion. Have no doubt, my poem is innocent and transparent. So when I say, I think I'll make myself a sandwich, the poem does not say, I drink and I love bad trips. Or if I say, my mother is dying, where's her phone? The poem does not say, try other it's fine, spare us or phone. One way to ensure the poem and its reader no misunderstanding is to never modulate. I'm done with emotion, I'm done, especially, with that certain weakness called exiting one's intention. What I mean is Spanish. What a mess that is, fishing for good old American bread, and ending up with a boatload of uncles and their boxes of salt cod, a round of ants poking for fat in your middle. So you see, with Genstein, even the sandwich isn't always made to my specifications, it's the poem that does what I demand. Everything else requires a series of steps. I call the nurse's station and explain to the nurse her accent thick as thieves that I'd like to speak to my mother. She calls out to my mother, "It's your daughter really?" She says this in Spanish, but for the sake of voice activation and this poem, you understand I can't go there. And she hands the phone to my mother, and my mother, who is not the poem, has trouble understanding me. So I write this poem, which understands me perfectly, and never needs the nurse's station, and never worries about unintelligible accents, or speaking loudly enough, or the trouble with dying, which can be understood as a loss of language. If so, the immigrant, my mother, has been misunderstood for so long. This death is from her last interpreters.
It always goes to my meditation tape, which is slightly embarrassing. Um, so this is called Dear Maria. So I thought one way is that my mother had dementia in the last years of her life, and it was hard to communicate with her on the phone. She couldn't call anymore, so there are phones here a lot in this book. She couldn't remember phone numbers. And just generally getting in touch with her was hard in the nursing home. So I thought, what if I wrote poems that were a series of letters to her? And they would start Dear Maria. And I realized that writing Dear Maria means that you can be writing to a lot of people, right? Maria is a very, very common name in Spanish. And then if you think of all the iterations of Maria in other languages, then you get Mary, Mariah, Marie, etc. So I thought about that, I thought of the ways in which that name Maria can connect a whole history. And I was also thinking of how it can connect a history of violence as well. And it kind of led me there. It wasn't sort of the intention. So there's a lot of, I thank Wikipedia for a lot of this poem. Dear Maria, dear Maria, dear Mary, Mariah, Marie, dear Mama, Mamacita, and Mami, dear fourth wheel of the Trinity, dear Puerto Rican ingenue in a red sash, dear off with their heads, dear diva, dear aria missing its M, dear storage engine, dear ships in your name, dear asteroid discovered in 1877, dear song by Café Tacuba, Green Day, The Jacksons, Men at Work, Blondie, Ricky Martin, Wu-Tang Clan, et al. Dear Maria, spoken in the bird's tail of Papua New Guinea, how do you solve a problem like dear pool-type reactor, dear uranium, how you enrich us, dear Spanish biscuit, dear sacrificial virgins of red or blonde hair, of dark brunette, of the slip, apron, or veil, but never a hat, of the fresh complexion turned composite, of Jack the Ripper's complete works, of fluency in Welsh, Spanish, English, Quechua, French, of obscure and undocumented origins, and of las colonias, querida María de los Ángeles, de la Luz, de Jesús, del Refugio, walking home or waiting for transporte de personal without executive safe routes. Dear Señorita Maquiladora, dexterous, tolerant of tedium, model workers for Lexmark, Foxconn, Comscope, etc. Dear Queen of the Plasma TV and Print Cartridge, dear Miss Stainless Steel Appliance, dear Crowned with Cigarettes, Soda Cans, Boot Prints, dear Left Without Nipples in the Desert Branded, dear Virgen de Guadalupe, hand us your sanitary napkin, blessed art thou, your blood is on everything. Just remembered while I was reading that Maria Damon is here. Another one of the many Marias I know.
Listening attentively.
I haven't been keeping track of time. Does someone tell me more or less the average? Do you have
8.
how long?
It's 8.
8 minutes?
It's 8 just now.
It's just
Yeah.
8? It's 8 o'clock, I see. Okay, I'll just read 2 more. So this poem's a little bit lighter. And if you know, like the last victim, Jack the Ripper, was named Mary. And then the women I allude to at the end are women who work in the maquiladoras in Juarez, who live in El Paso, and Juarez is right across the border. So, you know, your flat screen TVs and all of that are made, many of them are made by these women in these factories. Something that connects my mother as a former factory worker, I think, with this history of women working in factories. This is called paramour. So you know the word paramour, a French word, right, adopted into English. So keeping that in mind. Paramour. English is dirty, polyamorous. English wants me. English rides with girls and with boys. English keeps an open tab and never sleeps alone. English is a smooth talker who makes me say please. It's a bit of role-playing and I like a good tease. We have a safe word I keep forgetting. English likes pet names. English has a little secret, a past, another family. English is going to leave them for me. I've made English a set of keys. English brings me flowers stolen from a grave. English texts me, slips in as emojis, attaches selfies, not suitable for work. English has rules but accepts dates last minute. English makes booty calls. English makes me want it. When I was younger, my parents said, keep that English out of our house. If you leave with that... Did it go up? Oh my gosh, the ghost of my father. Turned off the light. Should I do a little jig or something? Very strange. Can everybody hear me? Should I just speak really loudly? When I was younger, my parents said, keep that English out of our house. If you leave with that miserable, don't come back. I said, God willing, in the language of the Inquisition. I climbed out my window, but always got caught. English had a hoopty that was the joint. Now my mother goes gaga over our cute babies. Together, English and I wrote my father's obituary. How many times have I said it's over, and English just laughs and says, come on, senorita, let's go for Chinese. We always end up in a fancy hotel where we give fake names, and as I lay my head to hear my lover breathe, I dream of Sam Patch plunging into water, a poem English gave me that had been given to another. So brownie points for anybody who knows who Sam Patch is. Sam Patch is the 19th century daredevil. He was a real person, but he's mentioned in Williams's Patterson. So, you know, from Patterson. So this Sam Patch, he dies by doing his last trick is to jump into the Genesee Falls, but then they don't recover his body until spring, right? Because the water thaws and they find his body. So Sam Patch. Okay, so I'm going to end with this poem, and I'm going to dedicate to my brother Carlos, because my brother Carlos is in this poem. He doesn't know it. He may not recognize himself. Bless you. be crying. I have this like instinct to just go and have the baby stop crying. Oh goodness, I can't find it. Okay. It's called Visitor's Log. And this is somewhat of an abstract poem, but if you think of the scenario, often the times that we would have family reunions or we would get together would be around my mother's bed in the nursing home. And that time, I think, for our family was hard, right? Like culturally, you're not super, like culturally for us, we always thought we'd never put our mother in a nursing home. And so there, questioning, there was a lot of guilt around it. So this is called Visitor's Log. And this was a time when my brother, Jose, who's in New Zealand right now and couldn't be here, he made a typical dish that my mother would make. Like all these recipes are going to be gone. I mean, that's metaphorical, but it's also figurative. Like all these recipes, these sort of old world recipes, or recipes that she would make here that, in a lot of ways made us like the weird immigrants, right? That we ate these things that other people didn't eat. So he made to bring to the nursing home pata y gallos, which are pig's feet, and how do you call it, gallos? Tripe. Yeah, so he made pig's feet and tripe to bring to the nursing home, and we all sat around her bed. But of course, like all the young, like my nieces, and they're just like, oh, like we're not going to eat this stuff, right? So we're all like digging in and eating it, and they're sort of really thinking it's gross. So that's kind of the scenario around it. Visitor's Log. As if the memory of burning hairs from hooves or soaking tripe in vinegar might an enclosure make. Traction from the present leads us back and not to the other side of the curtain where a woman wails to pry open a lid. We casually break off pieces of crackers and wipe on cheap napkins, oil and anisette, until the middle child crosses the threshold unafraid. We have failed in the most basic rule, to never turn from offal in favor of quiet or self-care or need, as if the ugliness and flavor of it would make unpronounceable our names. When we knew the secrets of transformation, of the long simmer, the cure, the careful pluck, still we fail every moment we turn our slippery grammars against us and let our children be adopted into perfect homes. We stood there, my brothers and I, ladling the honeycombed stomach into your dish, the last holders of something funny, yet never told again, as a cowlick fixed moments before the bulb flashes. We laughed that we knew the joke and were the joke, but would fail the test of translation, for which our children groan and push away a dish and throw open the curtains, their sunshine so big and so original. What do you call it when in a mind and in a language the sun goes down? When you float from floor to floor or let your sister braid your hair an afternoon before the war? I leave and they don't know to find a bed that is my own.